Before I begin, I want you to open your heart and mind. What you are about to hear is not just a story, it's a real encounter with the impossible, something that will challenge everything you think you know about faith, miracles, and God's power. Tonight, you will walk with three sisters whose lives were shattered, whose family was torn apart, and whose hearts were on the edge of despair, until a light appeared that changed everything. I want you to stay with me until the very end because what happens at the climax of this testimony is something that no one could have predicted. It's a miracle so raw, so powerful, that it will shake your spirit and make you ask yourself, could God do the same for me? Trust me, if you leave before the end, you will miss the moment that proves faith is not just a word. It's a force that can heal, restore, and set the captives free. By the time this testimony is over, you will understand that the God who healed a bedridden mother, called her daughters in dreams, and turned a family upside down is the same God who can step into your life today. He wants to show you His love, His power, and His plan for you. So stay, listen, and let your heart be ready, because what you're about to witness is not a story you can forget. I still remember the last time my father called the evening prayer. His voice was deep and calm, echoing through the narrow streets of Kano. Everyone respected him, not just because he was the muezzin, but because he lived a humble and kind life. He would wake us, his three daughters, before dawn to pray, telling us that a day without prayer is like a lamp without oil. But one afternoon, while preparing for as or prayer, he suddenly clutched his chest and fell to the ground. Everything after that happened so fast. Neighbors running, my mother shouting, people carrying him to the clinic. I was only 13, but I knew something terrible had happened. The doctor came out later and told us my father was gone. From that moment, our home became quiet, too quiet. The call to prayer that once filled our compound stopped forever. My mother, Halima, sat for days without speaking. She looked lost, like a bird whose wings had been broken. Then, one morning, she didn't get out of bed at all. At first, we thought she was just weak, but days turned into weeks and she could no longer move. The doctors said it was emotional paralysis, but to me, it looked like her spirit had given up. We tried everything, medicine, prayers at the mosque, fasting, charity, but nothing worked. For long years passed, and my mother's sickness became part of our daily life. She lay there, breathing softly, sometimes crying in her sleep. We took turns feeding her, cleaning her, and praying beside her bed. I often wondered if Allah had forgotten us. But deep down I kept hoping. I didn't know that something beyond my understanding was about to happen, something that would change not only my mother's life but all of ours forever. It was during Ramadan, on a night that felt heavier than usual. The air was still, the sky dark and quiet, until a sudden wind began to blow. I remember sitting beside my mother's bed, whispering prayers while my sisters, Aisha and Maryam, read from the Quran. The old lantern beside us flickered, making strange shadows dance on the wall. Then the rain came. It wasn't gentle. It crashed against the windows as thunder shook the house. The sound was so loud it felt like the sky was tearing apart. We ran to cover the leaking spots on the roof, placing bowls to catch the water, while our mother lay there, her eyes half open, breathing softly. As lightning flashed again and again, something unusual began to happen. I saw a strange glow near her bed. At first, I thought it was the lantern light reflecting on the metal frame. But it grew brighter, almost white, like lightning that didn't fade. My sisters didn't notice. They were facing the other way. But I couldn't move. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The glow began to take shape, a tall figure dressed in white, standing beside our mother. I wanted to scream, but something inside me told me to stay silent. The air felt peaceful and strong at the same time. My body trembled, yet I wasn't afraid. I couldn't hear words clearly, but I knew the figure was speaking, not with sound, but with something that went straight to my heart. It was as if he was saying something about peace and healing. The room became filled with a calmness that I cannot describe. Then suddenly, my mother gasped, a deep, desperate breath. She sat up with tears pouring down her face. Her weak hands lifted into the air as she cried out, saying over and over that she was healed. My sisters turned, shocked and frightened, asking what happened. My mother kept weeping and saying someone had touched her, that a man clothed in shining white had told her she would rise. I was frozen. Deep inside, I knew this was no ordinary dream or vision. Something holy had entered our home that night. I didn't yet understand who he was, but my heart would not stop trembling, not with fear, but with wonder. The next morning, sunlight filled the room for the first time in years. My mother, who had not walked in 4 years, was standing by the window. She was weak, yes, but her face shone like someone who had just been set free. Neighbors came running when they heard her voice outside. Some shouted, Subhanallah, while others whispered in confusion, saying maybe she had been under a spell that finally broke. But we knew better. We saw the light. All day people came to see her. Some rejoiced, others doubted. The local imam came too, reciting verses and warning us not to say strange things. When he left, my mother sat quietly, staring at her hands. Later that evening, she called the 3 of us to her side. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. We'd be honored to have you join this growing community of seekers and truth lovers. As you listen to this powerful testimony of transformation, we'd love for you to be part of the conversation. Share where you're watching from and what stands out to you in this journey. Your thoughts and reflections aren't just comments. They help shape a genuine dialogue around experiences that have the power to change lives. She said a man in shining white had stood beside her bed that night. She said he didn't speak loud, but his presence filled her whole body with peace and warmth. He let her know that her pain was over, that she should rise, and that the peace he gave would stay with her. When she described him, my heart raced. Everything she said matched what I had seen. Aisha began to cry, while Miriam whispered, "That sounds like Jesus." My mother went silent. The room suddenly felt heavy. We had always heard about Isa in the Quran, the prophet who healed the sick and raised the dead, but the way my mother spoke about him didn't sound like a prophet. It sounded like someone who carried the power of life itself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of his light, how it didn't hurt my eyes even though it was brighter than fire. I felt as if he was still near, watching us. I prayed, but my words didn't come out right. It was like my heart wanted to speak a new language I didn't yet know. A few days later, something strange began to happen. Each of us, my mother, my sisters, and I, began to dream. The same dream. We saw the same man in white walking toward us with hands stretched out. He didn't use words, but he made us understand that he was calling us to follow him, to know the truth of who he is. It frightened us. We didn't tell anyone for days. But deep inside, we knew this was not just another vision. It was a calling, one that would soon cost us everything. The dreams didn't stop. Every night, for almost 2 weeks, the same man in white appeared. His face shone with gentle light, and his eyes carried both strength and deep kindness. Sometimes he stood beside a river that glowed like silver, other times he walked through a path surrounded by light. Whenever I saw him, my heart would race, and I'd wake up trembling, not in fear but in something that felt like love and awe mixed together. One morning, as we sat eating together, my sister Miriam whispered that she saw him again. This time, he showed her a path and made her understand that the path was narrow but filled with peace. Aisha said she saw the same thing the night before. When they finished speaking, my mother quietly nodded and said she too had seen him. That was when I realized none of this was imagination. Something real and powerful was happening. We tried to ask the imam about the dreams, but he became angry and warned us not to think too much about such things. He said it might be a test from the enemy. But when I heard that, something inside me resisted. I couldn't believe that a presence so full of peace, so pure and full of light, could come from darkness. One evening, while everyone else was asleep, I went outside and sat under the moon. I whispered to the man I had seen, telling him that if he was truly from God, then I wanted to know him. I didn't hear a voice, but I felt warmth spread through my chest, as if someone invisible placed a hand over my heart. In that moment, I began to cry, not because I was sad, but because I felt loved in a way I never had before. The next day, I told my mother and sisters what happened. Instead of judging me, they said they felt the same thing, that same strange peace, that same pull toward something bigger than all of us. We didn't know any Christians personally, but we had heard of a small house fellowship near the edge of the city. My mother said maybe we should go there quietly and ask questions. I was afraid, but she said something I'll never forget, that when light calls you, you don't hide in the dark. We decided to go the next Friday night. None of us knew that this step would mark the beginning of our new life, one filled with both beauty and pain. That Friday night, the city was alive with sounds of prayer from every corner, the chants, the drums, the smell of food in the air. My sisters and I wrapped our shawls tightly and stepped out quietly, making sure the neighbors didn't see us. My mother watched from the window, her eyes filled with both courage and fear. She told us to be careful and whispered that she believed the man in white would guide us. The walk felt longer than usual. Every sound made my heart beat faster, barking dogs, footsteps, the echo of a passing motorbike. Miriam held my hand the whole way. The directions we had were simple: follow the dusty road past the old market, then turn left at a narrow lane where a small house with a red door stood. That was where the Christian fellowship met in secret. When we reached it, everything was quiet. The door opened just a little, and a man peeked out. He was middle-aged, wearing a simple shirt. He looked at us carefully, and I could tell he wasn't sure if he could trust us. Miriam spoke first, her voice shaking, saying we needed to ask questions about Isa, about Jesus. The man's eyes softened. He let us in quickly and locked the door behind us. Inside, a few people sat on mats, reading from the Bible. The air smelled of candle wax and dust, but there was something peaceful there. They welcomed us gently, offering us water and smiles. I noticed there was no fear in their eyes, only kindness. We told them about the dreams, about the man in white who healed our mother. When we finished, the room went silent. The leader, a woman named Grace, said that what we saw was the Lord revealing himself to us. She explained things we had never heard before, how Jesus was more than a prophet, how he came to give life and forgiveness, how his love was not limited to one people or religion. Her words felt like they were being planted inside my heart. Everything made sense. It was as if I had been blind and could now see. I began to weep. Miriam and Aisha too. We prayed that night, not the way we used to, but with our hearts wide open. Before we left, Grace told us we could come again if we wanted to learn more. She said following Jesus was a journey of faith, and that he calls each person in his own way. As we walked back home, I looked up at the sky. The storm clouds from days before were gone. The moon was full, and I felt as if someone above was smiling at us. I didn't yet know the cost of what we had begun, but my soul felt alive for the first time in years. Weeks passed, and we continued to visit the small fellowship in secret. Every time we went, it felt as though we were stepping into another world. A world where peace was not just a word, but something you could feel in your bones. We learned about the love of God, about forgiveness, and about how Jesus gave his life so we could be free from sin. The more we listened, the more I realized that the same presence that healed my mother was the same spirit we felt in that room. One night, after a time of prayer, Grace looked at us and said something that made my heart race. She said that if we truly believed, we could choose to be baptized, to show that we belonged to Jesus. I looked at my sisters. We didn't speak, but our eyes said the same thing. We were ready. That following Sunday evening, the small fellowship gathered quietly in the back of the house, where there was a narrow water tank used for washing. The night was calm. Only the sound of distant crickets filled the air. We sang softly, just a few words we had learned. Songs about peace, about new life, about being loved by the Savior. Then, one by one, we stepped into the water. I was the youngest, so I went last. When it was my turn, I could feel my heart pounding, but not from fear. It was something deeper, like a river flowing inside me. Grace prayed over me, her voice gentle, and then I went down into the water. As I came up, I felt something change. I can't explain it in ordinary words. It was as if all the heaviness I had carried, the grief, the confusion, the guilt, had been washed away. My heart felt light, clean, alive. I started to cry, and my sisters hugged me, crying too. That night, we went home quietly, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what it meant to belong to Jesus. It wasn't just a religion, it was like finding the truth I didn't even know I was missing. But soon after, our secret didn't stay secret for long. Something happened that forced our faith out into the open, and everything around us changed. It started with whispers. Someone from the neighborhood had seen us entering the small house with the red door more than once. By the next Friday, people were already talking. Our uncle came to visit, his face hard and angry. He asked where we had been going at night and why we were seen with those people. We tried to stay silent, but my mother spoke first. She told him gently that the man who healed her was Isai, and that we had gone to learn about him. At that moment, it felt like the air left the room. My uncle's face turned red. He shouted that she was deceived, that grief had made her lose her senses. He warned us that if we didn't repent and stop meeting those infidels, the family would cut us off completely. 4 days, our compound was filled with arguments. Neighbors came to question us. Some pleaded, others cursed. My sisters and I stayed close to our mother, afraid to leave the house. It hurt deeply. The same people who once loved and respected us now looked at us as if we had betrayed everything we stood for. But my mother didn't bend. She said she knew what she saw that night, and no one could take that truth away from her. She told them that the one who raised her from the bed of sickness had given her a new heart, one filled with peace she had never known before. She said even if everyone turned away, she would not deny the light that came to her. One evening, my uncle returned with other relatives. They spoke harshly, saying we had brought shame to the family. That night, my mother gathered us in her room and told us we might have to leave for a while. Tears filled her eyes as she said that sometimes standing for the truth means standing alone. So, with nothing but a small bag of clothes, we left our home quietly before sunrise. The road ahead was uncertain, but strangely, my heart wasn't afraid. I remembered the warmth of the man in white, that peace that covered my soul the night he appeared. I felt he was still with us, walking through the darkness beside us. That was the night we lost everything familiar, but it was also the night we truly learned what it meant to follow him. We walked for hours that morning, our sandals covered in dust, our hearts heavy yet strangely calm. We didn't know where we were going, only that we couldn't return home. My mother led us through narrow streets and across open fields until we reached a small community outside the city. It was quiet, filled with simple mud houses and tall trees that swayed gently in the breeze. Through a friend from the fellowship, we were given a place to stay, a small room behind a Christian family's home. It wasn't much, but to us, it felt like a safe place to breathe again. They welcomed us with warmth that reminded me of what my father used to say about hospitality, except this time, it came with something deeper, love that didn't expect anything in return. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, life began to rebuild itself. We joined the fellowship openly now, no longer hiding. We prayed together every morning and read from the Bible in the evenings. The stories of faith began to make sense in a way they never had before. I saw my mother smile again, the same woman who had once been too weak to move. Sometimes, when I looked at her, I thought of how far we had come. From sickness to healing, from confusion to peace, from fear to faith. There were nights when we still cried, missing our home, our family, the life we had lost. But every time we prayed, I felt strength rise inside me again. One night after fellowship, I sat outside looking at the stars. The sky was quiet, and the air was cool. As I prayed, I felt that familiar warmth again. The same gentle peace I had felt the night the man in white appeared. It was as if he was reminding me that we hadn't been abandoned, that he was still leading us. In that moment, I realized something powerful. Sometimes God allows everything around you to fall apart so he can rebuild you into who you were meant to be. I knew then that our story wasn't about what we had lost. It was about what we had found. Our new peace didn't last long before another storm came. This time, not from the sky, but from the people around us. Word had spread that we were living among Christians, and some men from our old neighborhood came looking for us. They didn't speak kindly. They said we had turned away from our faith and deserved punishment. I was terrified. For the first time, I understood what it really meant to suffer for what you believe. That night, our host family hid us in a back storeroom while the men shouted outside. My mother held us close, whispering prayers, asking God to protect us. I could hear the pounding on the gate, the angry voices calling our names. My hands shook, but inside, something told me not to be afraid. I remembered what we had learned in fellowship, that Jesus promised never to leave those who belonged to him. After what felt like hours, the men left. The house was quiet again, but I couldn't sleep. I asked my mother why we had to go through so much pain just for believing in what we saw with our own eyes. She smiled weakly and said that light will always be tested by darkness, but it will never lose its shine. Her words stayed with me. The next few days were tense, but the fellowship stood with us. They prayed for our safety, brought us food, and reminded us that every true follower of God faces trials. It was during this time that I truly began to understand faith, not as comfort, but as courage. It wasn't about having an easy life. It was about trusting even when everything seems impossible. I started reading more about Jesus, how he forgave those who hurt him, how he loved people who rejected him. It made me realize that our suffering was not wasted. It was part of something greater. Even the pain was being used to shape our hearts. One night, while praying, I felt peace again, that same deep warmth in my spirit. It was as though the man in white was letting me know that every tear, every fear, was seen, and that none of it would be in vain. That was when I understood. Following him wasn't about escaping trouble, but about walking through it with light in your heart. By the time the weeks turned into months, we had learned something that changed everything. Following Jesus was not a path of ease, but a path of life. My mother walked with us now, stronger than ever, her heart full of the peace she had received the night the man in white came. My sisters and I grew braver each day, praying, reading God's word, and trusting him even when the world around us was hard. I learned that faith is not just believing in miracles, it is living them. It is loving when people hate, forgiving when you are hurt, and serving when no one sees. I saw how the light of Jesus can shine even in the darkest places, how it can heal hearts, families, and cities if people choose to follow him. To anyone listening to my story, I want you to know this. Your journey with God is personal, and it may cost you comfort, approval, or even safety. But his love is worth every step. Pray always, read his word, and let his Spirit guide your thoughts. Walk in his light, even when it seems the world wants to pull you into darkness. Remember to love one another. Encourage the weak, stand with the lonely, forgive those who hurt you, and never stop seeking him. Every small act of faith matters. The same Jesus who healed my mother, who called us in our dreams, and who walked with us through storms will walk with you too. Follow him with your whole heart. Let him be your peace, your strength, and your guide. Because when you do, you will discover a life more beautiful than you could ever imagine. A life filled with light that cannot be extinguished.